There are some places in Mexico that only accept cash as payment. Now, Jordan White asked me a good question. Is it better to use cash or card while in Mexico? Let's look at 4 ways to pay for things while living in Mexico. Using cash in Mexico is the first way that you can pay for pretty much anything. Obviously, it's still the least secure way to pay for things because you could lose your cash, you could drop it, you could miscount it. It's a little bit harder to keep track of your purchases as compared to using a card, but it's still accepted pretty much everywhere in Mexico, and you can actually use Mexican pesos or US dollars in many locations. Now, this is very convenient, obviously, but do not expect to get a very good rate on your money if you are paying with things in US dollars. Just the store's not going to give you a very high conversion rate on your purchases. So I would say that the majority of the time you're going to want to be paying with Mexican pesos while you're living in Mexico. Now, there's a couple ways that you can get the Mexican pesos. Number one is you can just bring your native currency into the country and have it exchanged all over the place. There's all kinds of kiosks and shops where you can get that done. Another way you could get your money is to use an ATM and withdraw from your own bank account. Now, this means bringing your own debit card down to Mexico and using it in an ATM down here. There are some places where you can withdraw Mexican pesos, some places where you can withdraw USD, and there's some ATMs where you can withdraw both. But keep in mind that every ATM in Mexico is going to charge you to use it. So the least that I've seen is $1 per use. It goes up to much more, up to $6 that I've seen. Plus, the ATM may also convert the currency for you and not give you a very good rate. So it's important to try out a couple different machines, see which one has the smallest surcharge and which one is going to give you the best transaction rate as well. Another couple things to be aware of when you're using an ATM in Mexico is that you want to be using a debit card that has 0 foreign transaction fees. So you don't want to have to pay for the surcharge at the ATM plus the transaction rate and then have your bank back home charge you for using an ATM in another country. Also, you want to make sure that you don't have any outside of network withdrawal fees. So that'll just be another charge on top of whatever you're paying to get your money out. And lastly, just to be safe, if you are withdrawing money in Mexico, make sure you look out for something that's called the bank hawks. So those are people who are trying to eyeball how much money people are withdrawing from ATMs or from banks, and then if it's a substantial amount of money, they might call into a friend, say, hey, this person has this cash, intercept them once they leave this building or follow them home, something like that. So be careful about that. When I withdraw my money, I barely ever count it. I just fold it up real quick, put it into my wallet, and then count it when I'm in a more secure location. And I've never had any discrepancies with the withdrawals. It's always been the exact amount of money that I've withdrawn from the ATM. No problems with that. Another way to get cash down here in Mexico, instead of using your debit card from back home, is to actually open a bank account down here in Mexico and then use a local debit card. Now, this is actually a pretty easy process to open a bank account down here, but you have to have some form of residency. So you could get temporary residency or permanent residency. The requirements for those are as low as about $27,000 in a savings bank account or showing $2,000 or even less in monthly income. If you can prove either of those financial requirements, you can pretty easily get temporary residency here in Mexico, and that will allow you to open up a bank account really quickly. Now, once you have your bank account open down here in Mexico, it's really easy to call up your own bank back home and just have them send over a wire transfer down here to Mexico, and all of a sudden you will have your Mexican pesos in your account down here. Now, once you have a bank account down here in Mexico, it's going to be really important that you keep that account active, or you could lose that money completely. So why would that happen? Well, down here in Mexico, they have a general fund that money will be transferred into after 3 years of inactivity. Now, what happens after that is going to be up to you. You could either get that money back by requesting from your bank account that that money be returned to you, or if it sits in that account for 3 years, it could be lost permanently as it gets transferred into a fund that pays for the public health services down here in Mexico. Now, if you don't want to go through all the hassle of getting residency and then getting a bank account down here, there is another easy way to get money down here in Mexico. That's the second way, and that's to use a service called Xoom, which is a part of PayPal. Now, this allows you to send money to banks, to supermarkets, to OXXO, which is kind of like a 7-Eleven, and even to individual bank accounts. Now, you can pick up the money at the supermarket, at the OXXO, and at a bank as well. You're going to get a really good exchange rate. There is a service fee for doing this, but once you withdraw about $500, that's when they erase the service fee, and then it's totally free to get that money out through the Xoom service. And don't be intimidated to use it. It's really easy to use Xoom. You can pay your bills with it. You can pay your rent with it. it. You can get delivery with it. There's all kinds of ways to use Xoom and pay for things in Mexico. So those are a few easy ways to use cash in Mexico, but what if you're not a fan of using currency and carrying it around like that? Well, the third way you can pay for things in Mexico is by just using your foreign debit card as a main form of payment. It's obviously going to be much more secure than carrying around cash. You can follow your transactions much more easily, and the debit cards here can generally be used in the exact same way that you would use it back home. And I've got 6 tips for using your debit card in Mexico. The first one is that you let your bank know that you're actually out of the country, because you don't want to fly away, use your card, and then your bank suspects fraud and shuts down your card on you on day number 1. My second tip would be that you check the expiration date on your card before traveling. You don't want to be like me, leave in August, realize that your debit card shuts down in October, and then be sitting here in November without your foreign debit card anymore. My third tip is that you are not using a debit card that has any foreign transaction fees, because you're going to get charged that fee every time you use your card at an ATM or any time that you use it at a restaurant. You don't want to be losing that 3 to 5% or whatever the foreign transaction fee is on your card. Speaking of fees, my fourth tip for using a debit card in Mexico is that you avoid using it in some places where they're going to add a surcharge just for paying with a card. Some places will accept cash and they'll say, yeah, we'll take your card too, but we're going to add on a 5% surcharge. We don't want to do that. My fifth recommendation when using a debit card in Mexico is that when you're given the option between paying in pesos or whatever your native currency is, always select pesos. You're just going to get a better exchange rate in that instance. And my sixth and last recommendation for using a debit card in Mexico is that you keep it in a separate pocket than where you're keeping your wallet. Now, this is a security feature. Let's say you either drop your wallet or, God forbid, somebody robs you and takes your wallet or pickpockets you. At least you still have your card in your other pocket. This is just a way to not put all your eggs in one basket while walking around. Let's move on to the final way to pay for things in Mexico, and the last way is going to be using a credit card. Now, this is going to follow a lot of the same principles as using a debit card while in Mexico, but you can actually get reward points as well. So this means you need to pick the right credit card for full-time travel, and I have 3 tips for doing that. Number 1, again, is no foreign transaction fees. You don't want to get a credit card that offers you big points, but then charges you more on the foreign transaction fee to where it just either comes out in the wash or you end up paying more for the fee than what you get back in points. And there's lots of credit cards out there that are like that, so be careful. My second recommendation is that you get a credit card that doesn't have any annual fees. Now, I know there are some cards that offer real big rewards if you're paying for that annual fee. For example, you can get in a flight club or something like that, but I still don't like it that much. And that's because I like to get maybe a new card every single year, and I like to get the reward points just for signing up. So maybe I'm not even going to be using one of those older cards that has an annual fee, because I'm focusing on using a card that's giving me a sign-up bonus. So it would end up just being a waste to have to pay an annual fee for a card that I'm not even using. And I actually think that having that annual fee encourages you to spend more money. So not only are you paying for the annual fee, but then you're trying to get the rewards that come as a benefit with that card, and you're trying to spend enough to get those rewards. And I just don't think it's a very intelligent way to handle your money, especially when you come from a broke background like I did. And moreover, what if you actually find another credit card that gives you a better rate or better rewards without the annual fee? Well, now you're still stuck with that card with the annual fee, and you either got to pay that fee or you have to close the account. Whereas if you had just had cards that have no annual fees, then you don't have to worry about it. You can just leave those cards open and leave that credit line open as well. But my third and most important tip for using a credit card in Mexico is that you pick a card that has points back and hefty sign-up bonuses, or one or the other. It just depends on the card sometimes. So I've been traveling for a long time, and I have some cards I can actually recommend to you. The first would be the Chase Freedom Unlimited card. I like this one before I travel because it gives 5% back on any travel purchases. So that could be your Airbnbs, and it could be your flights as well. You automatically get 5% back using that card. Plus, the card gives you a $200 bonus sign-up just for spending $500 in the first month. So if you're buying that flight, if you're getting that Airbnb, it's really easy to spend that $500 real quick. You're immediately going to get your $200 back. However, after that, I don't like using this card anymore because it does have a foreign transaction fee. It's 3%. So once I'm actually out of the country, I stop using that card. But it is great for that sign-up bonus and for getting started. I'll link down to this card in the description box if you want to pick it up for yourself. So the second card I like to use while I'm actually traveling is the Amazon Prime Prime Visa card. And that's because it's accepted basically everywhere. I think I've only had it declined once. And you're going to get 2% back on restaurants, gas, pharmacies. You get 1% back everywhere else. And I like to use the points on this card to buy Christmas presents and birthday presents for my nephews and nieces back home in the United States. Now, the third card, and my favorite card that I like to use while traveling, is the Discover Cashback IT card. Now, while Discover is not accepted as widely as, say, the Amazon Prime Visa card, it does give you 1 to 5% back on your purchases. Plus, in the first year, it will give you double cash back. So if you're getting 5% back on a purchase, it will double that. You can actually get up to 10% back on a lot of your purchases using this card. And again, I will put a code down in the description box so you can get this card too, and it's even going to give you $50 just for using my link to sign up. So back to the original question, is it better to use cash or card while living in Mexico? Well, I think it's really good to have a combo of payment options. So you want to have cash for things like taxis, for restaurants, for little shops and knickknacks that you can stop at. Some of them just will not accept card, but of course you do want to have a debit card as well in case you run out of money. It's up to you if you want to go through the residency process to get the Mexican card or not. And lastly, you want to have those credit cards to get all your points back on your purchases. So what do you think is the best way to pay for stuff while traveling? Let me know down in the comment section, and make sure you check out this playlist right here to learn more about handling money while traveling.